The Apple ecosystem. It's something that we hear a lot about in the tech world. It's something that people that aren't in the Apple ecosystem are maybe a combination of jealous of, resentful towards, and maybe some other negative feelings. People inside the Apple ecosystem maybe feel a variation of different ways as well that might range from cozy, happy, and comfortable, or they might also feel some resentment, some trapped feelings about the way that things work. If you asked Apple what the Apple ecosystem was about, they would tell you that it's about synergy. It's about using all of their hardware, all of their software together because it works best together. If you asked the European Union, though, what it's about, they might give you an answer that sounds more negative. Something that might say, well, the Apple ecosystem might be more about trapping people into buying your products over and over, not allowing them to easily use other different products. That might be how they would describe it. And if we read some of these reports here, both from Mac Rumors and 9to5Mac, you might find some interesting information here about things that the European Union are apparently set to do to radically alter the way that Apple is able to do business and perhaps the way that the Apple ecosystem is able to function. So this first bit of news here is from 9to5Mac, and it comes from a little bit ago. Okay, this is from March 24th. And this is interesting, but if you tie it together with the next story, I think it becomes bigger than it is alone. But let's talk about this one first. The EU legislation to make iMessage and other messaging apps interoperable. So what we're talking about here, and I'll kind of just leave this on screen, we're talking about this push by EU lawmakers to make it so that these different messaging apps, and there are a ton of messaging apps, right? They mentioned Signal, WhatsApp, iMessage. Of course, there's just text messaging and RCS, which is rich chat services. This is what Google is pushing towards in many different ways. There's many different messages. Facebook Messenger, I could go on and on and on. EU lawmakers are trying to push towards a world wherein you could message between any of these with any of these. This writer here says, how about a Signal user that's able to send a message to a WhatsApp user? And that is sort of what we're talking about here. And currently, when you're talking about Apple, you could say, well, hey, iMessage users can send text messages to Android users, okay? Like you can already kind of do this, but not really the way that this is being pushed. Because I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school here. You can ask your average Apple user and your average Android user who text each other, and they might tell you that the experience is not great. There are some problems with doing this. There's some features that just don't quite hook up very well. And again, this is supposed to try and get rid of that. And the point of this is to just make things more fair, to make things more open so that people aren't being trapped in to these sort of walled gardens, because that's anti-consumer. And that's, again, that is the point of what they're doing here. They're trying to get rid of things that they deem to be anti-consumer. Now, you could argue maybe this is also a little bit anti-competition, right? Because if iMessage is the best and everyone wants to use iMessage, why do they then need to open up the walled garden and be compatible with something that isn't as quote-unquote good? This is definitely something that would be very controversial over here in the United States, and perhaps it's controversial in the EU as well. But if we read this quote here, users of a small or a big platform would then be able to exchange messages, send files, or make video calls across messaging apps, thus giving them more choice. As regards to interoperability obligation for social networks, co-legislators agreed that such interoperability provisions will be assessed in the future. So on its face, that actually sounds quite nice. How will that pan out in the real world? Hard to say. It also will require some companies to ask for users' explicit consent to collect personal data for advertising, and their platforms will have to let users freely choose web browser, virtual assistant, or search engines of their choice. Microsoft might be a little unhappy about that as well with their track record of trying to shoehorn you into using Microsoft Edge. But of course, Apple is an offender on these sorts of things as well. This is very interesting. So some of the walled garden behavior, some of the Apple ecosystem trapping being kind of chipped away against by the EU. Now let's talk about something a little bit further. With Apple's devices, the iPhone, you're going to be using the Lightning cable. Unfortunately, that is still the case, even though their iPad now uses USB Type-C. I am a big proponent of USB-C. I think everyone at this point are probably proponents of USB-C. If you look around my desk right here, I've got a phone that uses USB-C. I've got another phone that uses USB-C. I've got another phone that uses USB-C. I have a headset that uses USB-C. And that's the lovely thing about it. I could go get my Nintendo Switch, my Oculus Quest, all of these things charged with the same cable. So I can have one cable sitting there on a charge, and I can charge anything I want to charge. Now, if I had an iPhone, I would have to have a second cable someplace to be able to charge that. And the EU is deeming that that also is anti-consumer. And by virtue of this, they are, via Mac Rumors, moving one step closer to mandating Apple to switch iPhone, iPad, and AirPods to USB Type-C. Now, similarly to the bit about messaging apps, this is not directly targeting Apple, but Apple's behavior makes it sort of a prime target of this anyways, because everyone's already using USB-C. It says here, the proposal, known as a directive, will force all consumer electronic manufacturers who sell devices in Europe to ensure that all new phones, tablets, laptops, cameras, headphones, headsets, and handheld video game consoles, blah, 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 will basically use a USB-C port, unless they are too thin, too small to actually physically have one. And effectively, that's just Apple. Everyone's already using USB-C but them. So they are the prime candidate that would apparently, if this goes through, would have to change their behavior. Now, there's been talk of this for a long time, but it is now, like this article says, it is slowly moving forward, and you have to wonder what Apple's going to do here. Now, I want to point out that both of these are in the EU, so a lot of people may be thinking, well, that's the EU, that's only going to affect people in the EU. Well, I don't think that that is the case, but if they're going to go through the process of making an iPhone with a USB-C port, they're not going to just sell that in the EU. They're just going to do that everywhere. That will cost a lot of money to make special versions of the iPhone just for the EU and not give that to the rest of the world. If it's going to happen, they're just going to switch everything over. At least that's what seems to be obvious to me. And the same goes with the messaging thing. They're not going to allow iMessage to work better with WhatsApp in Europe, but nowhere else. So if these things do actually become law in the EU, they will have worldwide global effects. And I think that the messaging stuff might actually be the one that's more likely to happen, because I could genuinely see with what Apple's been doing with the MagSafe charger, that little puck on the back of their devices, I could see them, this might take a couple of years, and by the time it's actually going to be forced upon them, because they're going to have like a window, like by this year, by this date, you got to get this done. I could see them just removing the ports altogether and going fully MagSafe and going that route. And I don't know if that's something that would allow them to kind of skirt around this, or if the EU, if these lawmakers would be like, hey, no, that doesn't count. You got to have a USB-C port on there somewhere. Or if Apple could say, well, but we're not using a different port. We're doing something, this is wireless. This is something totally different. It seems to me that that's what Apple might be kind of pushing towards, is a portless design. It would be, more waterproof. It might be more durable. There would be, fewer things in there potentially externally that could be interfered with or broken. Perhaps that is what they're going to try to do to get around using USB-C. Now, of course, something like the iPad could definitely do that. Something like the AirPods, though, might be a little bit tricky to do that, but maybe they would have some sort of wireless data transfer pad you could set it on or something. It'd be very interesting to see if this actually comes to fruition. How do you feel about this, guys? Do you feel like this is an intrusion on the sort of free market type ideals? Do you think that these are good changes, that this is something that Apple sort of does and takes advantage of and kind of keeps people, like I've said many times in this video, inside that walled garden? The question becomes, are the people inside trapped inside, or are the people outside trapped outside? Which way do the walls work? Is it a combination of both? And is it a good thing to try and break these walls down a little bit and allow more interoperability and allow more compatibility, more consumer-friendly laws like this? Let me know what you think about all this in the comments down below. I'll see you on the next one, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.